pretty scary. So 4 years went past before they finally got the money to be able to do it. And part of the original plan was that the 2 Camphor Laurels would be removed and 13 native species of various types would be planted in their place. When it came to the actual time of doing this, there were some within the community who hadn't been around perhaps 4 years ago or hadn't known about the community consultation at the time, and they were very distressed to discover that the 2 Camphor Laurels were going. And as I'm sure a lot of you have seen on the news, that led by Lynn Hargraves, a number of people picketed, I guess, the trees, and finally the council changed its mind and decided that it wouldn't take the Camphor Laurels down. Gecko's position throughout all this, to be honest, we like the trees there because they give us shade, but we're very much aware that they are a Class 3 weed, and so we really felt that we could not support the campaign to retain them. However, we certainly respected Lynn and her co-campaigners for what they believed in and the fact that they were willing to stand up for that. And we didn't begrudge them the tea, coffee and toilet facilities that they were able to use at Gecko House. Since then, we learned on, at least I learned on Monday, I gather it was in the bulletin, but since I never read the bulletin, I didn't see it. Somebody has been in there sometime during the last week and they bored holes right around the base of both of those trees and poisoned them. The arborist and council became aware of that and put some kind of a moat around it, and they've been flooding the moat with water. So I guess in the hope that it will dilute the poison and save the trees. So we've got no idea whether it's going to or not. We just have to keep an eye on the trees. In the meantime, council has come up with a modified planting regime based on the fact that the trees will remain. And there's a copy of that downstairs at Gecko that you can have a look at, and I think Jane put it on our Facebook as well, so you can have a look at that. It's a bit small to try and read, I must admit, but at least it's there, and we'll certainly be keeping an eye on what they're up to. So that's basically the story behind all the Camphor Laurels, and it seemed appropriate to have John come along and talk to us about Camphor Laurels because he knows a lot about them, and has been dealing with them on and off up the valley. So I'm not sure, John, how you want to do this. Do you want me to press the button for you and you talk to the slides, or?
Yeah, I might as well. I'll see what comes up, if people agree to that. And anyone can talk to the slides maybe, but we'll just see what happens when you press the button. You just press buttons and it goes from one to another.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a typical Camphor Laurel tree where it's grown out in the open. And that's called, I forget what they call it officially, but it's a very expansive form of a tree. When a tree grows in the forest, it tends to go up and it's a branch that's broken off. So that's a tree grown in a very, without too much competition. And that's a classic. Most trees do that throughout the world. And Camphor Laurels is a super tree. They came from Asia, Japan, China, and perhaps the Chinese gold miners brought them. I'm not sure of the detail, maybe someone will know. Native China, Japan, 1822 is normal, that's good. And it was widely planted, possibly, I don't know whether it's planted anymore, but people love the tree. A lot of people love Camphor Laurel because they don't know much about trees. They see this beautiful green thing waving in the breezes, and somehow they relate to it because it is a classic tree. And it's declared Class 3 pest under Queensland legislation. That means I think you can get rid of it without too much permission. You can go and remove it, and it often costs quite a lot of money, but people won't stop people from removing Camphor Laurels in this state.
Yeah, they had it on farms, but it was very drought tolerant.
Oh, it's an extraordinary tree. We'll go into a bit of detail about its qualities. in a little while, but we'll all just maybe read through this because, have you all read that?
Probably done most of it
Does
anyway.
everybody know what a Camphor Laurel looks like? Or whoever it is?
Let's go outside and have a look.
As an estimate, those trees will probably be 20 or 30 years old, the big billowing clusters. When trees grow, they kind of anastomose their branches to make the cathedral-like appearance, that beautiful round dome-like effect. When the land is, or when the conditions are really vital, lots of water, they tend to cone up, they go into points. But as the wind blows and as it stresses the plant, the whole branchlets of the tree tends to dome off. See the cones and domes there? That happens everywhere, all over the world. Yeah.
Can somebody turn the big lights on and put the small ones on?
Is there more to go? Or is that it?
No. Everyone read all the details on each slide. We can read them out if you prefer. All right.
Just while that's there, you can see it a bit better. There's a comment there, Camphor Laurel kills undergrowth. Well, amazingly, Camphor Laurel, it can kill the grass, it can kill weeds, it can kill lantana, but then as the Camphor Laurel matures, and some native plants can grow in association with Camphor Laurel. And there is this little dance that happens. The pioneering plants in the native scene can grow alongside Camphor Laurel, and someone can come and sensitively kill the Camphor Laurel. It can rot away. And then there's this amazing burst of growth through the dying Camphor Laurel. That has happened. Has anyone experienced that? Yeah.
What's the time there? How long do they live?
I think they can live for a long time. There's one famous tree in the next valley. I think it's about 100 years old. And the elder of the valley wanted to see it gone. And there was an outcry from the people who took their kids to that Ingleside school. Remember that? It's a beautiful tree, a massive thing. It would be much more than 1.5 metres diameter, wouldn't it? It's about...
It's another of all the come along.
Yeah. So that man, Basil Smith, he's died a few years back, but he was born in the valley. Apparently, they said he never left it. Basil wanted that gone, and all his relatives did too. But the people in the school said, no, that tree shades our kids. So they kept it. And Basil died, his wife died, and his son made the comment, he doesn't want to spend the rest of his life killing Camphor. Tell him about your back. Because that tree, certainly the birds carp the seed, little seeds come up everywhere. We've all experienced. We all have our opinions about Camphor Laurel. You can all voice them whenever, maybe later. We'll have a little blast and then open to people who can. Increases erosion of stream bank. All right.
Challenging to read that. It means the leaves are toxic, I suppose. Oxidation of camphor in the water.
A synergist means it can kill animal, pests in maybe animal side or what are that, biocide. So it's a powerful biocide. So what they're saying about Camphor Laurel is that if it's swimming along the stream, it'll simplify the fish quality in the stream. There'll be toxins and there'll be not a very rich fauna around the Camphor Laurel trees. Those chemicals are toxic. And I didn't know, people never put it, okay. Flowering, totally deterred by volatile narcotic Camphor Laurel. This is exciting, isn't it? A powerful insect repellent, killer compound, kill by asphyxiation in a closed space. And Camphor Laurel used to be included in Swedish bitters. But when they found out about its quality, it was taken out. About a few decades ago, they took it out of Swedish bitters, yeah.
What's Swedish?
Camphor.
I had it put on my chest.
Oh, Swedish bitters is it him?
Oh, bitters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a,
breathing.
yeah.
Well, they had
John, we'll just swing your chair around a little bit.
Sure. Maybe I better stand up, I'm not sure. Have we all read that? Virulence. Ooh.
That's a good word, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not toxic to the bird.
Yes, it is.
Give us a bit more detail, Tom. Come on.
Well, as you saw before, it's got those poisons in it, natural poison for birds. I mean, they'll ingest it, and they might get away with it for a while, but after a while, it gradually builds up in the system. It's like arsenic, it just gradually builds up.
Have you got evidence of that?
No.
Well, certainly people around here must have seen, I better stand up with them, must have seen white-headed pigeons excitedly feeding under Camphor Laurel counties. You know, you're roaring up the Currumbin Valley when Camphor Laurel's dropping its fruit. And maybe a dozen of pretty motley looking white-headed pigeons are voraciously gorging the fallen fruit on the roadside. And as the cars roar by, they don't even fly up. Because we're ingesting. Now, I don't know whether they go away and die. I do not know that. I don't know the details of the toxicity for the native birds.
I've read that.
You've read that? That's good to know, Tom. So, you can see how in this room here, look, everyone talk whenever you got the urge, because it is a shared experience. And I have to say, I knew I was supposed to speak tonight, but I just came along. I guess we've all been through Camphor Laurel areas, and when you see a little seedling, you all pull it out. Because you figure if you get those young ones before they get big, then it kind of makes a difference. So, you know, we watched the Olympics in all its glory a couple of weeks ago, but there's planet maintenance to be undertaken all over the world. We busted a place up for this. So now the great Olympian experience of humanity is to somehow get on with tidying a place up and fixing it up. And one of those strategies in this area and wherever Camphor Laurels occurs, as soon as people can identify with Camphor Laurel, do a bit of yoga, to bend down, qigong, you know that stuff that people standing around waving their arms in the air? Well, it's time to wave your arms to make the planet work better, you know, to make a contribution. We humans have destroyed the planet to some extent, our ancestors, but now we've got the knowledge and experience to somehow make decisions that can improve the planet. And that's this controversy that happened out here. It was fascinating to see a beautiful woman chained to the tree. So this is a habitat tree. This tree's been here for 80 years. The kids planted this tree, and they probably did. Around this little schoolyard here, there's various trees that aren't indigenous, and a few that are. And she had a point, that these lovely shade trees, it's still got habitat. Birds come into them, they shelter, they build their nest. Animals play around them at night, the possums. And then there's little tiny creatures that live in those trees. And sure enough, it's an exotic plant. It comes from another country, but it does provide some conditions that native animals and other animals appreciate. So I think all the time, get up every morning, have another go at life. And they taught us when I was at school, the uncertainty principle. Everyone knows about that? Schrödinger, I think it was some German guy, and he wrote for chemistry. We learned chemistry at school. He said, you can never be too sure. There's always uncertainty. You know, some people are very fundamental. They say, we're certain about certain things. But people say it's always good to be a little bit doubtful about just about everything and ask questions. And that's what this night is about. The fact that we don't know what's the best decision. Like around here, we've all got our opinions. And Camphor Laurel's here. And there was a decision made by the council, and somehow other people made the decision. Someone's come and bored holes and put poison in. And maybe those trees will die. They might die slowly. They might look really ugly for a while. And who knows what will happen. But it gets us opinionated about what to do about this issue. Young trees up to 3 metres tall. Foliar sprays for toxins against basal bark sprays up to 6 metres tall. Stem injections can be used for trees shorter than 6 metres. Now, I never like using toxins. All through my life, I think, somehow to do without using toxins. Even though I'm a bit toxic at the moment. Somehow done something that caused me to not feel so good. So, it happened over long periods of time. I've got so many pour out of it. So, what I've done with Camphor Laurel is got my bow saw out, I've cut them off, and I've made teepees, used that fabulous timber to make these amazing things. And the people where I've made teepees with Camphor Laurel, when I say, you want me to take that beautiful teepee away, they say, no. Anyone who visits that person, they go up on the veranda and then they look around, and when they see the teepee, they get surprised, and she says, people love that teepee. People say, ooh, they're surprised she's got it there. So Camphor Laurel can be allowed to grow up, and then it can be cut down, and it can be utilised for things. And a lot of trees are like that. A lot of trees are introduced, a lot of plants are introduced. So we've got the 3 zones in our world. The utility zone, where we've got to somehow play with structure. It's a bit of a compromise. We've got all these mixed introduced plants and native plants growing together, and other plants and animals working, foxes and rats and mice. You know how we got that zone in our life? But then, in the Currumbin Valley, we've got original purity, Nichols National Park, and this wonderful tool of improving it. And then we got further up the valley, all by its own, the landscape's forgiven humans, and it's booming back to original conditions. And a lot of those places have not much Camphor Laurel, but there is perhaps a little bit in Nichols National Park, but it's unlikely to be too much. The edges might have a bit. There is a bit down below, and there's still a few Camphor Laurel in Nichols. Yeah. So it is a tree that's quite widely present here. And some people say it wasn't introduced at all. It's always been here. You heard that one?
Yeah, I
Haven't heard that? You haven't? Yeah. And they're unsure. They don't really know when it came in. It's like the story of Lantana. Everyone knows Lantana? That's a bit controversial too. Some people say it came in with the first fleet. Governor Phillips White. It came in for wedding bouquets. They wanted some lovely things to get the, whatever was happening in the colonies. So they had some pretty flowers. Other people say it went to Adelaide Botanical Gardens in the 1860s, and someone from the East Coast saw it and took it to Port Macquarie, and where it spread up and down the East Coast. So, a bit of uncertainty.
It's a bit like Paddy's Lucerne.
Yeah. Well, everyone's heard about Paddy's Lucerne? It's another weed. A weed that's hard to pull out. You all know that one in your backyard, you know, you sort of think, oh, that was a bit ugly. It's in the same family. It's in the hibiscus family. And you pull it out, it's hard. All in the gold fields of Victoria. The Irish, a few women who were there. And lots of Irish came in. And they may have bought that little plant with them. They call it Paddy's Lucerne, but I don't think so. I think it's a worldwide weed, cider reducer or Paddy's Lucerne. And they got this idea that that little hibiscus could save their kids from dying. So the story in the goldfields was just 2 leaves of Paddy's Lucerne. When the kids were dying of just diarrhea, they just put that in water and they could drink that water and it'd save them. And apparently that happened quite successfully. So it was known as this amazing plant that could stop kids from dying in the goldfields of Australia, the odd few that were being born there. Yeah. So it's an exciting world of weeds and other plants. And where some people go, us humans, we've got a bit of a reputation too. And here's the tree itself. And what's so fantastic about this tree? It's a classic tree in the family. What family is it in? Laurels, yeah, they call it Camphor Laurel. And what's that family called? Lauraceae. L-A-U-R-A-C-E-A. It's a worldwide family. Very common in rainforests. So there's lots of laurels in the Australian rainforest. And there's even trees that almost look the same as this. All through the rainforest of Eastern Australia. They call them walnuts. And a few others, I forget their names, but there's lots of laurels around here. And some of them are quite rare. But Camphor Laurel's got a crenulated leaf margin, I think that's the word there. You see that little waviness there? And that waviness is a rainforest characteristic. So when the water drops on the leaves, it's somehow a bit like a surfing experience. The water gets, it sort of gets roughed off the leaves fast, so that where after the rain's over, that leaf doesn't get too much fungal spores landing on it and ripping it to bits, or it wants to shed the water fast. And it's got what's called a little drip tip. See that little drip tip there? Everyone's look a bit of hand man. While I'm talking, you can be checking it out because it's a very exciting tree, and it's very similar to so many native in this rainforest around here. It even does an incredible Australian thing. See that there? What's going on there? Ooh. it's got a deciduous habit to it. So when things get dry, hasn't rained for 50, 60 days around this part of the world. So the ground's starting to crack. So what does Camphor Laurel do? It regulates its activity, it starts to drop quite a few roots. It turns into like it's in autumn and it becomes partially deciduous. Yeah? So it's an extraordinary tree that's tough. It can really hold the land, it can really set a scene. And people want to kill it. And when they do, it gets replaced by a whole biodiverse series of native plants. There's another thing about Camphor Laurel, and that is, if you rip off the leaves, a bit dark to see them, but if you rip off the leaves of Camphor Laurel, there's two little bumps towards the tip of that leaf, and they're called domatia. You all heard about domatia? D-O-M-U-S means home. And those two little holes are homes to a whole lot of microorganisms, predatory mites, and maybe protozoans. They haven't really found out the reason that plants have domatia, but all they know is that rainforest trees often have them, and when they do, they super tree. So what people are suggesting is those two little holes. It's good for you to see. You might have a microscope and all that, or maybe you just hand around. You can see if you can see two little bumps towards the top of the Camphor Laurel leaf. This is where the PL hangs on. And those domatia, what they do, people suggest, is the Camphor Laurel is growing, and those organisms, in that city of organisms in those tiny holes that aren't so tiny for the organisms, hundreds of them, thousands of them, millions of them maybe, they're in those little very protective domuses, house-like structures, and they are dragging gases directly from the air. People suggest even sulphur and nitrogen get dragged from the air, metabolised in those little cities, and the leaf can directly feed off that metabolite, those metabolites. So Camphor Laurel not only gets its nutrients from the ground, from dragging out, it's an extraordinary thing that plants do. They somehow pump out 4,000 litres of water a day, the average tree. And the water comes from the soil. They rip it out through their systems, out through the leaves, there's holes in the leaves, the stomata, and then they drag in CO2 from the air and they make carbohydrates. And somehow they make the structure of the plants, they make a few other things too. But basically that's what they do. The nutrients that come out of the soil go to make the tree, and it happens all over the world, and the plant, and whatever it is, the plants do that. And Camphor Laurels do it very fast, very efficiently. But they are helped by these little tiny cities called domatia, D-O-M-A-T-I-A, in the leaves. And it's exciting. It is a symbiosis. That's an extraordinary symbiosis. You can see, and when you look at some leaves, you see these two little bumps, and they're the domatia. And you turn the leaf upside down, and in the bottom there should be little holes, and that's where the organisms are living. So where it rains, it hits the leaves, and it bounces off the water. And then underneath the leaf, in the very protected part, are these thousands, billions, whatever it is, the microbes. And that reminds us that bacteria, the microbes, the fungi, and invertebrates of the great world we're on have been around for how long? Yeah, about 3.5 or 4 billion years it might be by now. They're finding that these are the ancient organisms that set the stage up for the success of plants. How long have the flowering plants been around, like Camphor Laurel? Only 100 million years. Flowers were invented 100 million years ago. They're modified for reproductive purposes. And reproduction is pretty exciting, isn't it? Invented about 1 billion years ago for the planet of sexual reproduction. It's been very successful because half the genes from parents mix together to make a unique individual like all of us. So good old flowers, flowering plants, sexually reproduced. What makes it all work so well? Usually, it's animals. Animals are attracted to the flowers. How do they do it? Well, they differentiate the male and female parts around the ovules. They'll turn into the ovary and then make the little seeds develop somehow. There's this beautiful sweet nectar that's exuded by the flower. And the animals, and they're diving in there. And as they dive in, there's this male part from different flowers preferably, but that somehow the pollen is taken by the bats, the birds, the bees, the insects that are doing the pollination. And good old Camphor Laurel and all the rest they turn into fruits. And then the fruits are grabbed by other animals and they're carted off. And they make it all happen all over the world. So it's this extraordinary world we live in that's a bit compromised. And Camphor Laurels is part of the compromise. And there's a whole lot of us. And the challenge for us is how to spend our time. Now I'm going to sit down now. You can all tell us your opinions. Will we take it in turns or just yell it out randomly? What do you reckon, everybody? What can we do about this Camphor Laurel issue? Anyone got strong opinions? Any opinions?
You mentioned about the birds before, John.
Yeah.
You've probably seen on documentaries, I think on the Amazon, how all the parrots and all the animals have to go and they all eat this specific clay in this banks of this particular creek or whatever, because all those berries over there are poisonous to all the birds and other animals that eat them. They all come and eat this clay. And even all the tigers, and that's the land, they all come and eat some too. And maybe the birds you mentioned before are finding like an antidote in something similar.
Sounds interesting, isn't it? Could be the case.
Sounds good.
Yeah, because animals are pretty resilient, aren't they? You know, like, look at us, we're pretty resilient too. And we do what we can according to our understanding and our experience. And we rely on the world to somehow muddle through. And frankly, on the southern Gulf Coast, the show's muddling through pretty swiftly. Most of us, I guess, live on the southern Gulf Coast, and have to say that I've travelled the world a little bit. And this place is pretty special. You go to other parts of the world, it's cold and wet. You come back here, and it's reasonable, isn't it? And northern New South Wales is much more clear than the southern Gulf Coast. But yet we've got affinities, and we can easily go over the border. Thank you very much, Australia, for that. And we can easily travel north, but round here, there's something special. And from the ocean to the mountains, it's getting better. Been here for about 30 years, about 3 decades, came from Brisbane. I looked down the Common Valley 30 years ago. There was grass and clearings. But I looked down from right at the top of the valley down, you can hardly see any clearings. The forest has come booming down from the hillsides and it's filled in the Common Valley. In the low country it is. I've seen a lot of this valley. And I'd say along the creek, you know, I remember Sue Robbins. You all remember Sue Robbins? Yeah, she didn't tell about your valley. Oh, geez, I feel sorry for the Common Valley. You ever drive up the Common Valley, all those Camphor Laurels along the valley. But there's a few Camphor Laurels arching over the roadways to drive up the Common Valley. Yeah, quite a few. And there's Camphor Laurels on the edge of the forest. But I can say, when I get up in the scrub, in the high valley, there's areas that are Camphor Laurel free. There's quite a lot of Camphor Laurels.
Yeah, it's pretty dominated by the eucalypt.
Eucalypts are pretty tough. You heard about the eucalypt around here, the fast growing one? Fastest growing tree in the world. What is it? Yeah, there's one of them growing out there. We hope it doesn't die with that path it won't pass. You know, when you disturb around a gum tree, often it can die. And we hope with this lovely bit of modification that's been proposed around here, that tree stays alive. Because I guess some kid planted that. So, how fast is it flooded gum grow? 13 metres a year, increasing. It's got the record for the world. Where did that record occur? East Africa. They've carted gum trees all around the world. And they've been very successful. Yeah, and in California.
They're like Camphor Laurels.
Was that in?
Most of the Camphor Laurels that I see out in the valley in most courses are all next to fences where the birds have been sitting on.
It's true.
And they all run along the fences, and the middle of the paddocks can be clear if they've been used for. But in like 100 years ago, the first settlers had to clear the valley all the way back to the wall, all the way back to Televoja Mountain, basically. And so everything else is regrowing, everything is growing back. You look at old photos from 1930 of Springbrook Plateau, and you can't find a tree on there, you know, on the plateau itself. So it's gradually, since they've got away from that, the dairy farming, everything is slowly regenerating itself.
Yeah, quite rapidly in case. So the Camphor Laurels is certainly in the forest, and sometimes where you least expect it is a Camphor Laurel, but often it's overtaken by the rainforest, and it's unreproductive. So a little tiny wispy Camphor Laurels growing somewhere up there, but the rainforest, original magnificence of this east coast, has dominated the Camphor Laurel, and it's no longer a reproductive scene. But on the edge here, those camphors there probably threw a few fruit, and maybe others. There's a camphor there, camphor there. It'd be nice to see them all gone in lots of ways. But in the city here, people say, oh, the beautiful shade trees. There's always this compromise. And certainly, what I've considered in life, like I have to tell a story today. I went, go to camp, I've been going there about 30 years. Trying to look after the place, trying to let it grow back to rainforest and other natural vegetation. Been caretaking the high mountain, the camp there, and there's this mountain 482 metres above sea level. It's called Mount Tumberwick, and some spelling an Aboriginal name. And I went there today, and the maintenance guy said to me, there's a guy up there, he's cleared it all, cleared around where his boundary was for his little property, and he had a 2-acre property. So I couldn't help myself up and then meet down Gecko to roar up. Well, I went through New South Wales, came in, drove up to him, and I have to say, when I saw what had happened, I started ranting a little bit. And he said, don't come here with that attitude. Who are you anyway, and all this sort of stuff. Because I planted a lot of avocados, planted a lot of food up where he knocked it all out. He knocked all the beautiful food forest that made up there, and he'd gone way over his boundary. Didn't check his boundary. I said, do you know how much land you got here? He said, no, I don't. But he cleared it off. He cleared off all the way around. And yeah, it was a bit sad, really, because a lot of those trees will die off that he's cleared around, and they were native trees. So, I had to, we both settled down a bit, and I found his boundary pegs. Oh, there's one there. The machine that he used had knocked them out, but you could see where they had been, at least one of them, so that's a start from working out where his boundaries. So this happens all the time. People come and they destroy, and then there's a change and there's a building up again. So I couldn't get too upset about it because, well, it's happened. You just got to take advantage of it. That's what Brett Wiley said. Remember that famous Australian artist? Written up on his gallery was, take advantage of your mistakes. I guess he applied it to his paintings, I'm not sure. But anyway, so we all make mistakes. And we just got to somehow forget it. It's like that woman down there. She prayed before she turned up to save those trees. She prayed to Jesus, God. And for her, it was really important to do that. And to have a go. And look what it's done. It's got us here talking about Camphor Laurels. And she had her reasons. And, we're all having a go. Every one of us is having a go at doing the right thing. So, any other comments about what to do about Camphor Laurels?
Yeah, I do. I've tried to dive a little deep into the topic after the controversy over the last few weeks, and I can't seem to get some straight answers from government on a local, state, federal level. Firstly, the simple question of who's responsible for even researching the tree count. Do we know how many Camphor Laurels are in the area? Is there an agency that's taking care of this research, or? Great.
Well, it's too difficult. There's too many. It's out of control. Camphor Laurel is out of control in these valleys. And along with privet. Privet's out of control now. And there was a man who lived in Talabudger Valley who said to me quite a while ago, he said, if you really want to do some good work in your lifetime, make sure that privet escapes. You're on the valley. It's gone. It's out there. I told the council repeatedly, can you please remove those big privets along the roadside near the school? And they haven't done it. And now privet probably will be up in the scroll. You know what happens with privet? It's another plant that's very hard to kill, very hard to get rid of. So we've got a few big babies that have come into this valley, and it'll take a bit of commitment to get rid of them, but it's possible. And the strategies are kind of logical. Now, like I talk about it myself, where in the cities and towns, it's a mixed bag. You can't expect it to be pure original. You can't dig everything out and replace it with natives. So that's why I guess this thing here, this controversy over the Camphor Laurels, there's still a couple left. They're going to get rid of those two, but leave these ones. And they could go too, because Gecko's made a lovely little garden there, and they get, if the Camphor Laurels are sensitive to gone, that'd grow up, and that would make a nice little native corner there. We're hoping to showcase these grounds to make it a great teaching aid for kids. You know, give a lot of butterfly plants, rare plants maybe, mixture of habitats to demonstrate what used to grow around here. And it'd be nice to get rid of these trees that aren't really well, but with reverence. It's always good to say, well, thanks very much for the schoolroom. Those trees are planted for 80 years, they've served people, people have loved them. You know, it's nice to come across the bridge and see the wind kind of rattling their branches, swaying, and their animals have appreciated. So just somehow give this respect, but then get on with the jobs. So we've got to create employment from removing camphor laurel and trivet and all the other weeds that are invading according to our awareness and understanding. That's a really important Olympic strategy for humanity. We've got to, anyone who wants to really do a good job and kill camphor, dig out camphor with sensitivity.
But John, hasn't it gone too far?
Nothing ever goes too
Well,
far.
look at through Tomahawk Road.
Yeah.
It's just people on their supply side too. It's just looking, that's all it is.
Yeah, well, that's New South Wales.
Yeah,
But,
it's right next to my place.
Yeah, what happened in New South Wales, you heard that story, haven't you? That in 1860, the biggest rainforest in Australia was cut down around Byron Bay.
Yeah.
It was called the Big Scrub. Who did it? A handful of men. They wanted to make dairy farms. How did they do it? Driving. The technique was called driving. And what they did is with their hand tools, they cut through trees, beautiful native rainforest trees, about a third of the way through on the uphill side. And they go all the way up an incline until they found what they call a driving tree at the top. So that driving tree was possibly a big feat. It was useless for timber. They didn't want the timber anyway. They just wanted to clear the land to make dairy farms. That was the brief that they had when they landed at Byron Bay. They didn't build a jetty. They brought ships in. Alec Griffiths arrived. The bloke who made the sanctuary. He arrived in Australia with his family from Norfolk Island on a ship that berthed at Byron Bay in the jetty. It was washed away in the 1950s with a cyclone, along with the trawler fleet. And then they shifted the trawlers to Brunswick Head. And so the men left in 1860, cut a driving tree at the top of that slope where they'd cut trees through a third of the way through on the upper side, and like dominoes, that tree had fallen, and all the other trees and vines would rip and tear and wrench. And it'll last for a long time apparently. You cut a driving tree, the joke was you'd cut it on Friday afternoon, come back on a Monday, and the forest would still be sort of wrenching and tearing with the kind of the movement of the plants, the wind was blowing things still. So when it wrenched and teared, it had ripped the timber apart in such a way that 3 months later, a fire could be lit at the bottom of that incline, and it would burn that hillside of fabulous fuel like a furnace. And that would turn the rock to soil in place, turn the soil to rock in places. And there's certain areas, you can go around up at the Crumman Valley, I've seen it, you know, taking the bulldozer through the old banana farm there, and you see in the gullies, what they did is they used to push the trees down in the gullies when they cleared it for bananas. Biggest banana plantation in the southern hemisphere at the end of Crumman Valley, it's called Garden of Eden. And they'd push the trees in the valley and then they'd light a fire at the bottom a few months later, and they'd roar up those gullies and turn the soil to rock. And there it is, you know, like a big furnace, like it was in geological process. So that's what people have done. But forgiveness is everywhere. No? So the planet's still rolling on. We're still having a go. What do we do?
Humans sound a lot more dangerous than Camphor Laurels, brother.
It does, doesn't it?
You sound very scary.
It's scary, isn't it?
Very scary.
But I suggest maybe they could do that with camphor laurels. You know, get a hillside of camphor laurels. Get those young kids, you know, get the bit out of control, get them up there, cutting through, and then dropping them. And then maybe that'll work. Yeah, they'd like it.
Well, we could set up a business where we sold the timber.
Oh, it'd be a great idea.
What about that regen plant they were going to build for the cane and over the border in northern New South Wales? Because Camphor Laurels, I know it's a big expense with the government, there's a lot of people needs work. The Camphor Laurels could be cut down, taken down and used to make energy, basically, electricity.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a fabulous tree. It, well, everyone's gone to Byron Bay, isn't it? You go to the arts estate, you see these guys making camphor laurel beds with breadboards. You seen all that?
They can turn them up for buzzard chips.
What is that?
So what?
For chips for your garden.
Oh, sure. Camphor laurel. And it's a very useful tree.
So the camphor will be poisonous?
Well, what they say, you know, when they're selling it, is that, ooh, you get a lovely little tiny bit of that lovely thing called camphor oil. It's good for you. You know how even now arsenic, you know how we used to spray arsenic all through this valley? And it's become a micronutrient for humans. So, Swedish bitters, and Swedes have got a thing for it. And they say that a little bit of camphor, not too much, a lot, and it's good for you. So, there it is. A bit concerned, about worldwide outcry about camphor oil toxicity. They took it out of their bitters. And Swedish bitters are quite famous. So, we're going to play with it. We're already playing with it because we live here and there's lots of camphor oil around. So maybe embrace it. You know how we've been given instructions. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Maybe we can apply that to camphor oil and really get to know it, get to play with it. Yeah?
It makes really nice furniture.
Nice furniture.
It might be the next
Oh, camphor oil. Well, the classic, you know how they're sending it back in New South Wales, there's quite a lot of, apparently it's being sent back to China. You heard about that? So what they do is they cut it down, they put it in containers, they ship it back to China. And people, well, they make the camphor chest, you know, the classic camphor chest. Well, yeah, I don't know how many mother go with beautiful jumpers.
Well, the people are coming over here, so they can make it.
For sure. And my mother gave me these jumpers, and what's happened is moths go. And you put them in a camphor oil chest. That was the bars. Some people even get a few sprigs of camphor oil and put it in their cupboards. You heard about it? So it's a valuable plant. It's got useful, and it can be utilised. Certainly. So get to know the natives, leave it perspective, and encourage originality. These zones with camphor oil, get to harvest the camphor oil creatively, and in such a way that it reduces the abundance, and you can live in those areas. Like there's heard about the development up in Rumble Valley. I think it's about 20 acres, 50 acres, I don't know what it is, 100, I think it's 200, might be close to 300 acres. Danny Dolan's old farm, remember Danny Dolan? A character at Currumbin Valley, died quite a few years ago. But somehow the farm now is in the hands of Jewish people. The story of the Jewish people blowing up to Currumbin Valley. And maybe in the television valley. The old Canberra property. So there's an agreement to split that up into 10-acre blocks. The council's agreed. So what's happened now is they're actually killing all the camphor oil on that block. There's a lot of them, but they're planting natives. They're getting a bit upset about the cows coming and busting up their work. So there's a lady up the road, Rosemary Mayhew, and she's got quite a lot of cows that she's grazing on that property. People drop there, they want to graze their horses there. So a lot of local people having a hard time finding a place to put their horses. But they're refusing any other people to come and play with that land. They don't know when it's going to come about. But the latest I know is Jewish people from Melbourne own that property and they want to be part of the development.
So is this a case of rather than relying on government to step in and take some action and create policies,
Oh, definitely.
is this perhaps something that the community itself or individuals should be gearing towards a focus group or something of the sorts to create an industry out of it?
Oh, definitely. There's a lot of opportunity with camphor oil around here. And, I've had a few crazy ideas over the years. Like you find them up in the scrub, and the idea is to make them unreproductive. So to cut down the lovely big branches and to drop them down and build a beautiful house, a tree house in a camphor oil. And then be able to keep in touch with it so it doesn't grow back, so you can stop it being reproductive. And live happily ever after in this amazing kind of cradle of branches. I don't have anything done yet, but I'll dream of doing it one day. But now, that is a possibility. You use camphor oil creatively, so you keep, that one goes down, then you go around and cut up a few more, maybe make a kid's teepee out of the little saplings that have come up around that tree. So you kind of claim an area ecologically, and you consciously limit the spread of camphor oil and make something beautiful, ecological, and productive out of the scene that you're part of. That's logical. We're so kind of affected by our culture, our financial world, and the kind of governments that we've got, all the rules. But to live ecologically is the challenge of the times we're in. And it'd be nice to say to people, go up the valley, find a patch of camphor oil, play with it so it doesn't spread, and live happily ever after. And hope everything's going to work out all right. And hundreds of people could live in the Currumbin Valley and have that little patch where they control the camphor oil, encourage natives, have a place where it's away from the camphor oil and grow their veggies and fruits. Like I bought a few fruits in tonight. Now I know that all that tasty food up there is beautiful, but I've been a bit affected by it over the years, so I've got to now eat these sorts of things. And Avocados grow well in this valley. You knock down a few avocados in the same family as camphor laurel. See how they look like a big camphor laurel
Yeah,
tree?
the leaf
Avocado.
very much like it.
The leaves very much like it.
Yeah.
So, it's exciting times. Any more comments?
Yeah, I was curious as to how clover contributes to erosion.
Yeah, that was one that I was going to blast at, but I thought I'd just let it go. So, yeah, camphor laurel, I've seen it grow on creeks. Everyone seen that? Grows along creeks, and the roots get big. And sure enough, there is sometimes some undercutting where the camphor laurels grow. Maybe eventually those camphor laurels flop into the creek. Like there's a lovely lady up here, Jerry Rogers, you all know her. She lives in this place, it's got this fabulous fruit orchard, you know, with amazing fruits, you know, I like to go there quite often. And she's got a bit of creek frontage. And certainly when you go down to the creek, camphor laurels dominate it, and there is a bit of undercutting. So maybe that's what they're saying, that the native landscape would involve a lot of gnat rush, you know, along in amongst other native trees, less erosion, you know, more batter. With the camphor laurels, there's so many that get massive roots, and then there's the antibiotic. Camphor laurels have got this camphor that does actually kill some of the maybe the herbaceous plants and other plants that would grow under them if they weren't so aggressive. Now some plants are aggressive. They've got antibiotic chemicals that limit the growth of other plants.
Gum trees, pine trees.
Yeah, pine trees have got it, they make the soil acidic. So we've got all these issues all around us. And camphor perhaps would contribute to simplifying the creek bank and water erosion.
There's one native tree that drops aluminium, builds up the soil of aluminium, and its leaves around, and other plants can grow there apart from its own plants.
Do you know what that native tree is here?
Oh, look, I don't think it's tallowood, but it's something like that.
Yeah.
It's in the book from the librarian over the border, the Green Cold, whatever it was.
Oh, yeah, it'd be good to find out more about it.
20 years ago, sort of thing. I can find out. I've got it in home.
Right.
Does it actually?
It pulls, somehow it pulls out of the soil or the air, it pulls
Oh,
aluminium out, and then it saves enough of it, mustn't need it to grow, and it drops enough of it down onto the ground, build the soil up, aluminium in the soil, and so that all other plants won't grow there, but other plants of itself will grow.
Could be silky oak. The silky oak's an amazing plant. You all know silky oak?
No, it's not silky.
Okay. The silky oak does that. So silky oak grows in pure stands along rivers. And it drops leaves, and it's antibiotic. It doesn't allow other plants to grow amongst it. So when you go up around Mount Barney, people been up that way? You go along the river and you see in springtime an amazing bunch of orange with the silky oaks all flowering down certain reach of the gullies of creeks. So there's lots of plants like that. Hey, I'm not going to answer that. But somewhere there. Hey, I haven't had a phone for so long that for me, excuse me, look, you can all talk amongst yourselves.